Money and power can hide a man's sins, but they can't force him to love you. Carmela learned this while hiding in the shadows of Le Bernardin, listening to her husband call her a fat, pathetic shield. That was the entire world. The sweet Mafia wife finally died. Carmela Costello was not what anyone pictured when they heard the phrase Mafia wife. In a glamorous New York underworld populated by razor-thin former models draped in Tom Ford, Carmela stood out. She was a size 22. She had soft, generous curves, a round face that flushed easily, and a lifelong battle with a thyroid condition that made losing weight an impossible nightmare. While the other wives gossiped over champagne salads at Bergdorf Goodman, Carmela baked. She found comfort in the quiet rhythm of kneading dough, hiding her deep insecurities behind the walls of her sprawling Tribeca penthouse. 3 years ago, she had married Silas Romano. Silas was the kind of man who commanded a room the second he walked in. 6'2", sharply handsome, always tailored in custom Bryony suits and utterly ruthless. He was the underboss of the Romano crime family, ambitious and cold. Carmela had been foolish enough to think he loved her. She had mistaken his initial calculated tenderness for genuine affection. The brutal reality was far less romantic. Carmela was the only daughter of Vincent the Bull Costello, the aging don who controlled the lucrative East Coast shipping ports. Silas didn't want Carmela's heart. He wanted her father's docks. Marrying Carmela was the ultimate strategic move. It solidified a permanent alliance between the Romanos and the Costellos, putting Silas in direct line for total control. Once the wedding ring was on her finger, Silas' warmth vanished, replaced by a chilling indifference. He bought her apology gifts, heavy Cartier love bracelets, endless bouquets of white roses, but he rarely touched her. Their marriage was a ghost town. Carmela tried everything. She hired elite nutritionists, subjected herself to grueling sessions with trainers at Equinox, and wept silently in her custom marble bathroom when the scale refused to budge. Then came Chloe. Chloe Sinclair was everything Carmela was not, a size 0 runway model with sharp cheekbones, a cascading mane of blonde hair, and a cruel, knowing smile. The whispers in the Mafia underground started almost immediately. Silas was seen with Chloe at private VIP tables at Carbone, buying her diamonds on Fifth Avenue, treating her like the real wife while Carmela was kept locked away like an embarrassing family secret. The breaking point arrived on a rainy Tuesday in late October. Silas was hosting a high-stakes dinner in a private dining room at Le Bernardin, schmoozing city officials and his capos. Carmela had spent hours getting ready, forcing herself into a custom black velvet gown that she hoped made her look a little less heavy. Throughout the dinner, Silas barely looked at her. He played the perfect host, pouring expensive wine, but his body language toward his wife was a wall of ice. Midway through the evening, Carmela excused herself to the restroom. She felt utterly suffocated by the glares of the other mob wives, whose eyes screamed pity and disdain. Taking a moment to compose herself in the lavish, dimly lit hallway, she splashed cold water on her wrists. As she walked back toward the private room, she paused. The heavy mahogany door was cracked open just an inch. Silas had stepped into the antechamber to smoke a cigar with his trusted right-hand man, Tommy, and another guest who had slipped in through the kitchen. Carmela's breath caught in her throat. It was Chloe. The model was sitting brazenly on the edge of a mahogany credenza, her long legs tangled with Silas. "I don't know how you do it, Dom," Chloe sneered, her voice dripping with venom, "having to wake up next to that whale. Why do you even bring her out? She's embarrassing." A walking tent in Chanel. Carmela froze, her hand hovering over the brass doorknob. She waited, her heart hammering against her ribs, praying for her husband to defend her, to say something, anything that proved he cared. Instead, Silas chuckled. The sound was like a physical blow to Carmela's stomach. He took a slow drag of his cigar and took a sip of his Macallan 25. "Relax, Chloe." Silas's voice was smooth, devoid of any guilt. "You know exactly why she's here. She's just a shield. As long as I'm married to Vincent's fat daughter, the Costello ports are mine. The feds look at us and see a devoted husband taking care of a pathetic woman. The father stays happy. The money keeps laundering through the docks and no one asks questions. She's a useful, oblivious distraction. That's it." Tommy laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You gotta admit, boss, the commitment is impressive." "Taking one for the family. I do what I have to do for the Romanos," Silas replied coldly, pulling Chloe in by the waist. "Now, stop whining. You know you're the only one I actually want." Outside the door, Carmela didn't cry. The tears that usually came so easily to her simply didn't exist. Instead, a strange, terrifying numbness washed over her. The sweet, naive girl who baked pies and prayed for her husband's love died right there on the plush carpet of the restaurant hallway. In her place, Vincent Costello's daughter finally woke up. She turned around and quietly walked out the back exit of the restaurant, stepping into the freezing Manhattan rain. Carmela didn't confront Silas that night. When he finally came home at 3 a.m., smelling faintly of Chloe's Tom Ford perfume, Carmela was lying in bed, her back turned, pretending to be asleep. She knew that confronting him would only result in him gaslighting her, tightening his grip, and possibly putting her in physical danger. She was dealing with a monster who viewed her as property, a mere lease agreement for a shipping empire. For the next 3 weeks, Carmela played the role of the oblivious, heavy wife perfectly. She smiled softly at Sunday dinners. She accepted his distant pecks on the cheek, but behind her soft exterior, her mind was moving with the tactical precision of a 5-star general. Then, tragedy struck. Her father, Vincent, suffered a massive heart attack while playing cards at his social club in Brooklyn. He died before the paramedics could even load him into the ambulance. The funeral at St. Patrick's Cathedral was a media circus. FBI agents snapped photos from blacked-out SUVs across the street, while the 5 families gathered to pay their respects. Silas played the grieving son-in-law flawlessly. He wore a sharp black suit, kept a protective arm around Carmela's shoulders, and accepted the hushed condolences of the underworld. "Don't worry, Pen," Silas whispered in her ear as they watched her father's casket being lowered into the ground. "I'll take care of everything. The business is safe with me." Carmela looked at him, her face obscured by a thick black veil. "I know you will try," she thought, "because you think you've already won." What Silas didn't know, what no one knew, was that Vincent the Bull Costello was not a fool. He had always known the nature of the men in his world. He knew Silas was a shark. Before he died, Vincent had set up a fail-safe. The shipping ports were indeed the physical asset, but the money, the millions in untraceable cash, the real estate deeds, the blackmail ledgers on every corrupt politician in New York, and the routing numbers for the family's Swiss accounts at Julius Baer were not willed to the Romano family. They were entrusted solely to a biometric vault in Zurich, and the only person whose fingerprints, retinal scan, and voice authorization could unlock it was Carmela. The night after the funeral, Silas informed Carmela he had to go to settle some disputes in New Jersey. Carmela knew he was actually taking Chloe to his private estate in the Hamptons to celebrate his new uncontested power. It was the window she had been waiting for. The moment Silas's Maybach pulled out of the Tribeca garage, Carmela went to work. She didn't pack her designer clothes. She didn't take the heavy Cartier jewelry Silas had bought her. She found them disgusting now, like chains of a prisoner. She only packed her father's encrypted hard drives, her passports, and a small, unassuming black notebook her father had given her on her 21st birthday. She called a secure, encrypted number, A man answered on the second ring. It was Gideon, an ex-Mossad private security contractor who had owed her father a blood debt. "It's time," Carmela said softly. "Extraction team is 3 minutes out, Messrs. Costello, wheels up at Teterboro in 40, Gideon replied. Before she walked out the door of the penthouse for the last time, Carmela went into Silas's massive mahogany-paneled home office. She took off her 3-carat diamond wedding ring and placed it perfectly in the center of his leather blotter. Next to it, she pasted a single sheet of heavy cardstock. She didn't write a long emotional letter. She simply wrote, "I am no longer your shield." Check the Julius Baer accounts. By the time Silas returned from the Hamptons 2 days later, he was riding high. He was the new king of the docks. He walked into his penthouse, annoyed that the lights were off and no smell of baking was wafting from the kitchen. "Carmela," he shouted, throwing his keys onto the counter. "Where are you?" "I'm starving." Silence. He marched into his office intending to pour a drink, and froze. He saw the ring. He saw the note. A cold spike of adrenaline hit his chest. He snatched up the paper, reading the single line. Check the Julius Baer accounts. His hands shaking, Silas frantically dialed his lead offshore accountant in Geneva. "Get into the Costello master accounts, now." He roared into the phone. He heard the furious kicking of a keyboard on the other end, then a long, terrifying pause. "Boss?" The accountant's voice trembled. "They're gone. The main accounts, the shell companies, the blind trusts for the warehouse deeds. Everything. What do you mean, gone?" Silas screamed, his face turning purple, the veins in his neck bulging. "Where did the money go?" "It's been legally transferred out, sir. Authorized by the primary biometric holder. There's zero balance." "Boss, she took everything. You own the physical docks, but without the operational funds to pay the unions, the workers will strike by tomorrow morning. You have nothing." Silas dropped the phone. The device clattered against the hardwood floor. He stared at the empty wedding ring sitting on his desk. The fat, pathetic, oblivious woman he had mocked had just completely dismantled his empire in a matter of hours. And she was gone. The crisp, thin air of the Swiss Alps was a world away from the humid, blood-soaked concrete of New York. Carmela sat on the sprawling terrace of a heavily fortified estate overlooking Lake Zurich, wrapped in a thick cashmere shawl. She was still the same woman, soft, heavy, with curves that the cruel world of the Mafia had deemed unworthy. But the way she carried herself had fundamentally shifted. She no longer slouched to make herself invisible. She no longer wore oversized, shapeless designer gowns meant to hide her existence. She wore custom-tailored silk that draped perfectly over her size 22 frame, her chin held high, her eyes sharp and calculating. She had not run away to hide. She had relocated to conquer. Back in New York, the Romano family empire was imploding with spectacular violence. Without the operational funds from the Julius Baer accounts, Silas was entirely paralyzed. The physical ownership of the Costello ports meant nothing if he couldn't pay the men who actually moved the cargo. Within 48 hours of Carmela's disappearance, the International Longshoremen's Association initiated a brutal, unyielding strike. Miles of shipping containers sat rotting on the docks. Smuggled weapons, illicit narcotics, and millions in untaxed merchandise were locked down tight, heavily guarded by Union men who had loved Vincent the Bull Costello and despised the arrogant son-in-law who had taken his place. Silas' descent into panic was swift and humiliating. He paced the floors of his Tribeca penthouse like a trapped predator. His right-hand man, Tommy, was fielding hundreds of furious phone calls from the other 5 families. The commission, the ruling body of the East Coast Mafia, was bleeding money because of the bottleneck at the ports. And in their world, losing money was a sin punishable by death. "Where the hell is she?" Silas roared, shattering a baccarat crystal tumbler against the marble fireplace. "She's a fat, pathetic baker. She doesn't know the first thing about moving ghosts." "How is she hiding from us?" "She's off the grid, boss," Tommy replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Her passports haven't been scanned. The credit cards are dead. We reached out to our guys in the NYPD and the feds. Nothing. It's like she evaporated. And boss, the Lucchese family is demanding their cut from the incoming shipments. If we don't pay them by Friday, they're going to consider it an act of war." Silas' jaw clenched so hard his teeth threatened to crack. He had always believed power came from fear and physical dominance. He had never respected the silent, invisible power of logistics and accounting. Carmela had weaponized the one thing he didn't understand against him. To make matters worse, Chloe was becoming an unbearable liability. The blonde model had been thrilled when Carmela vanished, immediately moving her Louis Vuitton trunks into the master bedroom. But her fantasy of being a pampered Mafia queen shattered the moment Silas' credit card started declining. When her black Amex was rejected at Saks Fifth Avenue for a $15,000 handbag, Chloe threw a tantrum that echoed through the penthouse. "I didn't sign up for this, Don," she shrieked one evening, tossing her manicured hands in the air. "You told me you were the king of New York now. You said that whale was out of our lives and we had everything." "Shut your mouth, Chloe," Silas snapped, his eyes wild, the stress carving deep, haggard lines into his handsome face. "I am handling it. I just need a bridge loan. I need cash." Desperation drove Silas to make the worst mistake of his life, with the legitimate banks refusing to touch him and the commission freezing him out until the ports reopened. Silas went to the Russians. He took a massive, high-interest loan from a notoriously brutal Bratva boss named Yuri Volkov, using the physical deeds to the Tribeca penthouse in the Hamptons estate as collateral. It was a temporary fix to pay off the Lucchese's and try to bribe the union bosses back to work. What Silas didn't know was that Yuri Volkov wasn't the actual source of the money. In her sunlit study in Zurich, Carmela took a sip of Earl Grey tea and looked at her secure laptop. Gideon, the imposing ex-Mossad operative who served as her shadow, stood quietly by the door. "The wire transfer was accepted, Miss Costello," Gideon said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Silas just signed over all his real estate assets to the Volkov syndicate to secure the cash." Carmela smiled. It was a cold, unfamiliar expression on her face, but it felt intoxicating. "And Volkov understands our arrangement?" "Yes, ma'am. He keeps a 10% finder's fee for acting as the intermediary face. But the debt belongs to your shell corporation. You now own the paper on Silas's life. If he misses a single payment, you have the legal right to seize everything he has left." "He will miss the payment," Carmela said softly, turning her gaze back to the serene waters of the lake, "because I'm going to make sure the unions never go back to work for him. Pay the strike fund, Gideon. Double what the workers are losing in wages. Let them stay home with their families." For the next 2 months, Carmela slowly and methodically suffocated her husband. She was a ghost in the machine of his life. Every time Silas tried to secure a new shipping route, Carmela's lawyers legally blocked it. Every time he tried to liquidate an asset, he found a lien placed against it by an anonymous offshore trust. The stress was eating him alive. He lost weight, his custom Bryony suits hanging off his diminishing frame. He drank heavily, paranoia setting in as he realized that someone with infinite resources was hunting him, and he was completely blind to their identity. Chloe finally abandoned him in late December. She packed her bags while he was out trying to beg the commission for a grace period, leaving nothing but a text message saying she was moving to Dubai with a tech billionaire. Silas didn't even have the energy to smash his phone. He was an entire world that was Sishan and alone. By January, Silas was a dead man walking. The Bratva loan had defaulted. The Russian mobsters were circling, demanding the deeds to his properties. The commission had officially stripped him of his title as underboss, declaring him a liability and a failure. His own capos, Salvatore and Carmine, had stopped taking his calls, aligning themselves with rival factions to save their own skins. It was in this dark, desperate hour that Silas received a lifeline. Or rather, a perfectly baited hook. Tommy burst into the dilapidated safe house Silas had been forced to rent in Queens, clutching a burner phone. "Boss, I got her. I found Carmela." Silas shot up from the stained sofa, his bloodshot eyes widening. "Where?" "One of our guys works security at the private aviation terminal at JFK. He flagged a flight manifest. Carmela is flying in tonight. She's meeting with a high-level Swiss banker at the old Costello warehouse in Brooklyn to sign over the final port authorizations to a European buyer. She's trying to sell the docks out from under us." A sickening mix of rage and triumph washed over Silas. This was it. She was coming back to his territory. She was getting sloppy. If he could corner her, if he could force her to transfer the offshore funds back to him at gunpoint, he could fix everything. He could pay off the Russians, buy back his seat on the commission, and finally get rid of his fat, treacherous wife permanently. "Get the men," Silas snarled, checking the magazine of his Glock 19. "All of them who are still loyal. We're going to Brooklyn." The old Costello warehouse sat on the edge of the East River, battered by the freezing winter wind. Rain lashed against the corrugated steel roof as Silas' two black SUVs rolled up, with their headlights cut. He stepped out into the freezing mud, flanked by Tommy and 4 heavily armed enforcers. The warehouse looked abandoned, save for a single black Mercedes parked near the loading bay. Silas kicked the side door open, sweeping his gun across the cavernous, dimly lit space. At the far end of the warehouse, sitting casually at a heavy oak desk her father used to use, was Carmela. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't trembling. She wore a stunning, tailored crimson coat that made her presence command the entire room. She was calmly reviewing a stack of documents, completely unbothered by the men storming in with weapons drawn. "It's over, Carmela," Silas barked, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. He marched toward her, his gun leveled directly at her chest. "Did you really think you could play in my world and win? You're nothing but a pathetic baker. Now you're going to open that laptop and you're going to wire every single cent back to my accounts." Carmela looked up, her expression utterly serene. She slowly closed the file folder and folded her hands on the desk. "Hello, Silas. You look tired." "Shut up," he screamed, his finger twitching on the trigger. "Transfer the money, now. Or I swear to God I'll blow your brains out and let the rats eat you." Carmela didn't flinch. "You're not going to shoot me, Silas." "You can't. Try me." "I don't have to," she said smoothly. "Look up." Silas froze. Slowly, he and Tommy raised their eyes to the catwalks circling the upper perimeter of the warehouse. Stepping out of the shadows were a dozen men dressed in tactical black gear, holding suppressed assault rifles equipped with laser sights. A dozen red dots painted Silas' chest and forehead. Standing at the forefront of the catwalk was Gideon, his weapon resting casually on the railing, aimed squarely at Silas's heart. "My security team," Carmela explained calmly. "Gideon and his associates have been looking forward to meeting you." Silas' bravado instantly shattered. The gun in his hand felt like a lead weight. Tommy and the other enforcers immediately dropped their weapons, raising their hands in surrender, completely abandoning their boss. What is this?" Silas stammered, his voice cracking. "This is the end," Carmela said, standing up. She walked around the desk, her footsteps echoing heavily in the silence. She stopped just a few feet from him, looking into the eyes of the man who had tormented her for years. "You called me a shield," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, low pitch. "You thought my weight made me stupid. You thought my kindness made me weak. You used me to hide from the feds and to steal my father's legacy." "Carmela, listen to me," Silas pleaded, his arrogance replaced by a pathetic, whining desperation. He lowered his gun, holding his hands up. "We can fix this. We're husband and wife. I was stressed I made mistakes. Chloe meant nothing to me. We can run the city together." Carmela laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that sliced right through his fragile ego. "Run the city together? Silas, you don't even run your own life anymore. I bought your debt from Yuri Volkov. You're entirely bankrupt. I own the penthouse, I own the Hamptons estate, and I own your life." She reached into her coat pocket and tossed a thick leather-bound ledger onto the floor at his feet. "What is that?" Silas whispered, staring at it like it was a venomous snake. "That is my father's blackmail ledger," Carmela said. "It contains every bribe, every extortion racket, and every murder you personally ordered over the last 5 years. I didn't call the police, Silas. I'm not sending you to prison." Silas let out a shaky breath of relief. "I sent copies of that ledger to the commission," Carmela continued, her eyes turning to ice, "and to the bosses of the Luques and Genovese families, along with proof that you were planning to flip on them to the FBI to save yourself when the strike bankrupted you." Silas' face drained of all color. His knees actually buckled, sending him crashing to the dirty concrete floor. No, Carmela, they'll kill me." "You gave them a death warrant." "You wrote the warrant, Silas," she replied, staring down at him with zero pity. "I just delivered it." She turned her back to him and began walking toward the loading bay, where her Mercedes was waiting. "Carmela, please," Silas sobbed, crawling forward, his tailored suit soaking up the mud and oil from the floor. "You can't leave me like this. I'm your husband." "You loved me." She paused, looking over her shoulder one last time. "The woman who loved you died in the hallway of Le Bernardin," Carmela said softly. "I'm just the ghost she left behind." She slipped into the back of the Mercedes. The heavy doors closed and the engine purred to life. As the car drove out into the freezing New York rain, heading toward the private airstrip that would take her back to her empire in Zurich, Carmela didn't look back. Behind her, the tactical team lowered their weapons and melted into the shadows, leaving Silas Romano alone on the floor, waiting for the commission's assassins to arrive. He was finally the one left with nothing, and she was free. Did Carmela's ultimate revenge leave you breathless? If you loved this story of power, betrayal, and the woman taking back her life, smash that like button right now. Don't forget to share this incredible Mafia drama with your friends and hit subscribe to our channel for more intense, twist-filled stories you won't be able to stop watching.